Welcome to today's historical deep dive. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague, and your greatest hope is the next harvest isn't stolen by raiders or ruined by frost. Your lifespan statistically is shorter than a modern house cat's. Welcome to the Middle Ages. We talk about kings and castles, battles and cathedrals, but what of the millions who simply endured? What was it like to wake up in a world so raw, so demanding? Your survival wasn't guaranteed, and every shadow hinted at pestilence or the devil himself. This is not the romanticized age of chivalry, but the muddy, hungry, fearful reality of medieval life, seen through the eyes of those who lived it. Imagine a life where the future is a constant, gnawing uncertainty, where your only comfort is the worn wooden cross around your neck, the flickering candle before a saint's image, and the shared misery of your neighbors. We're stepping back into the dust, the straw, and the unrelenting cold to understand the true rhythm of their days, the surprising resilience born of necessity, and the quiet ways they shaped a world utterly alien to our own. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You haven't slept properly for weeks. The straw is thin against the frozen ground, offering little buffer against the biting dampness seeping up from the packed earth floor. The gnawing in your belly is a familiar companion, a dull, persistent ache that wakes you before the sun even considers rising. Waking isn't a gentle return to consciousness, no slow fading of dreams or stretch into comfort. It's a harsh plunge back into brutal reality. The air in the small cottage hits your face like a physical blow. Sharp, icy, stealing the little warmth your body generates. The fire is out, leaving only the acrid memory of smoke clinging to the rough-hewn walls and the heavy, damp air. Beside you, your youngest coughs again, a wet, rattling sound that tightens a knot in your chest. Will it be the coughing sickness, like the miller's girl, or just the perpetual chill that settles into bones? You pull the thin, coarse wool blanket tighter, but it does little against the pervasive cold. Everything feels damp. Your clothes, the straw, the air you breathe. There's a smell here, too, one that never truly dissipates. The earthy funk of the floor, the stale smoke, the unmistakable scent of unwashed bodies living in close quarters. And something else, a faint, underlying whiff of decay, a reminder of the constant struggle against rot, illness, and the inevitability of death hovering just outside the door. This is the beginning of another day, indistinguishable from yesterday and likely tomorrow, marked not by promise, but by the sheer, undeniable fact of having survived the night. There is no soft transition, no moment of peace, only the immediate, brutal demand of existence pressing down. Before thought, before prayer, comes the instinct to just be, to simply get up and face the unrelenting gray light seeping through the tiny, unglazed window opening. It is a life stripped bare, defined by immediate needs, warmth, food, and the fragile thread of breath. You wake in darkness. The fire is out. Beside you, your youngest coughs. Again. The air bites with damp cold, thick with the mingled smells of earth, smoke, and the livestock huddled just beyond the thin partition wall. Their breathing, a soft counterpoint to the wind rattling the shutters. This is your home. Not a haven of comfort, but a functional box against the elements. A shell you built with your own hands, with the hands of your kin, your neighbors. Look around. The walls are not stone, not even sturdy planks fitted tight. They are timber frames, posts sunk into the packed earth floor, interwoven with branches, the wattle, and plastered thick, inside and out, with daub. Mud mixed with straw, animal dung, perhaps a bit of lime, if you were lucky. It hardens in the sun, a miracle of necessity, but it is porous. It breathes the damp in. The smoke lingers within it. Rain can soften it. Mice can burrow through it. And the constant struggle against its slow decay is another quiet layer of life. Above you, the roof is thatch, bundles of straw or reeds tied onto the timbers, layered thick to shed the rain. Insects live in it, sometimes rodents. It's a constant fire hazard, a fact you live with every day, especially in the dry months or when sparks fly from the hearth. A chimney might exist in a grander house, but here, the smoke from your small central fire mostly finds its way out through a smoke hole in the roof, or simply permeates the space, staining the timbers black, burning your eyes, but offering precious warmth. This shared warmth is why the animals are so close. Their body heat is a resource, a form of passive survival technology in a world where fuel is precious and labor exhausting. Yet, the closeness brings the flies, the parasites, the constant reminder that you share your most intimate space with creatures whose health is tied directly to your own and whose sickness can easily become yours. The windows are not windows as you know them. There is no glass. An impossible luxury, a substance of shimmering magic, perhaps seen in the windows of a distant cathedral. Never here. Instead, there are openings, slits in the wall you can cover with heavy wooden shutters hinged crudely, or perhaps stretched animal hide, greased with fat to let in a dim, hazy light. But mostly they are shut. Against the driving rain, against the biting wind, against the wolves that might come too close in winter. They keep out the elements, yes, but they also keep out the light, plunging the interior into gloom, even on a clear day. Most work, most life happens outside or by the flickering precious light of the fire or a tallow candle. This home is a testament to necessity and communal effort. No single family could easily fell the trees, prepare the timbers, gather the branches, mix the daub in such quantities, or thatch a roof alone. The raising of a house was a village event, a barn raising on a smaller scale, but just as vital. Your neighbors helped you. You helped them. It fostered a deep, inescapable interdependence. There is no room for true privacy in this life, not in this house. Family sleeps together, often on straw pallets, sharing body heat. Activities from cooking to mending to conversation happen within earshot and sight. There are no hidden corners for secrets, few walls against the constant presence of others. This enforced transparency might seem oppressive, but it also functions as a social regulator. Your behavior is always in some way observed or inferred by those who share your immediate world. It forces a kind of honesty, perhaps, or simply a deep, ingrained understanding of who belongs where. Who is doing what? You know your wife's breathing, your child's restless sleep, the low murmur of your father-in-law's snores, the rustle of the chicken outside the wall. It is a constant symphony of shared existence, a reminder that your survival is not an individual project. When illness comes, it spreads through this shared space like fire through dry thatch. When hunger gnaws, every mouth in this small structure feels its bite. Consider the sheer effort: hauling water, gathering wood, maintaining the structure against rain, wind, and time. This is not a passive shelter. It demands constant labor, a slow, unending negotiation with the raw materials of the earth. There is a quiet melancholy in this perpetual struggle, a sense that you are always just holding back the wildness, the decay, the collapse. Yet, within these mud walls, generations are born, live, and die. Simple meals are shared. Stories are told in the firelight. Children learn the ways of the world at their parents' knees. It is a container for life, basic and brutal, but life nonetheless. Ask yourself, could you find peace in such relentless proximity? Would the lack of private space erode your spirit, or would the constant presence of others offer a different kind of security, a buffer against the terrifying solitude of the world outside your thin, mud-plastered walls? What part of your modern self, accustomed to locks and boundaries, would survive intact? It makes you wonder about the things we consider essential, the things they did without, and the surprising resilience of the human heart when forced to bend, not break, against the harsh, unyielding frame of existence. They found purpose here, built lives here, simply because there was nowhere else to go, and nothing else to do but build. The damp earth clings to your boots, heavy and cold. The air bites at your cheeks, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something else, the deep, dark smell of soil freshly turned. It is barely dawn, but the fields are already stirring. Your life, your family's life, is mapped across these furrows, etched into the rhythm of seasons you cannot control. You work this land, day in, day out, but it is not yours. It belongs to the Lord, a distant figure whose demands for a share of the harvest feel less real than the ache in your back. The land is your master, a capricious tyrant. It gives life in the abundance of a good harvest, but just as easily snatches it away with a late frost, or a mysterious blight that turns the stalks black. You watch the sky constantly, reading it like a sacred text, the shape of the clouds, the flight of birds, the way the wind sighs through the bare trees in winter. These are the signs that dictate your fate, more potent than any royal decree. Too much rain, and the seeds rot. Too little, and they wither. A hailstorm can shatter a year's hope in moments. You know the feel of different soils in your hand, the way the clay holds water. The sand lets it drain. You know which plants prefer which corner of the field. This intimate knowledge, born of generations working the same ground, is your greatest asset and your deepest vulnerability. This constant, grinding uncertainty breeds a specific kind of fear, and that fear shapes belief. When the crops fail despite your labor, you look beyond the obvious. Was it God's wrath? A curse from a neighbor with the evil eye? Did you forget to leave a small offering at the boundary stone? You pray for good weather, for healthy grain, for a bountiful yield, often to saints whose feast days align with planting or harvest. But you also whisper appeasement to older spirits, just in case. The line between faith, practicality, and outright superstition blurs, because when hunger is a constant companion, you grasp at any straw that might offer control, or at least an explanation for suffering. The practical knowledge of farming teaches patience and observation. The unpredictable cruelty of nature forces a reliance on the unseen. It is ironic, perhaps, this deep, intuitive understanding of the physical world, coupled with a fervent belief in forces utterly beyond it. But how else do you survive when the only thing between you and starvation is the mood of the sky and the health of the earth you do not even own? Ask yourself, when every furrow you'll plow is a gamble against the sky, and your very existence hangs on the whim of nature and the needs of a distant lord, are you truly living, or just delaying the inevitable? The pale dawn barely touches the thatch roof, but the bell tolls anyway. Not the church bell yet, but the deep, demanding clang from the manor house. Today is a corvée day, a labor day on the Lord's domain. Not your own few strips of land, wrestled from the scrub and stone, but his vast, rich fields. Fields that will yield his harvest, built on your sweat. You rise, the ache from yesterday already settled in your bones. The walk to his fields feels longer than the walk to your own. Here, the pace is different. Eyes are watching. The reeve, the Lord's appointed man, rides back and forth on his sturdy horse, overseeing. There's no singing, little chatter among the laborers. The work feels heavier because it's not for your own family, not for your winter stores. It's for his barns, his table, his endless needs. Swing the scythe, bend your back. The grain falls, golden and heavy, a bounty you will not fully taste. And it's not just the labor. Soon the harvest from your own land will be ready. You've prayed to patron saints for good weather, fought off pests, weeded till your hands bled, fearing a poor yield, like the coming of a miniature plague upon your larder. But a tenth, perhaps more, is not yours. The reeve will come, or you will take it to the manor house. The best sheaves often seem to catch their eye, and the flour you finally mill from what's left, you'll pay a fee to use the Lord's mill. The bread you bake, pay to use his oven. Every step from field to mouth is taxed. It is a web of dependency, spun from the threads of obligation. His authority isn't just economic, it's total. He administers justice in his own court, settles disputes among the villagers, grants or denies permission for marriages, even travel. His word can elevate or crush a family. The reeve or the bailiff is his ever-present shadow, a reminder that disobedience, even just grumbling, has consequences. He is the bedrock of their social order, offering protection from outside threats, yes, but extracting a heavy, constant price for that precarious security. It is a strange, symbiotic dance. You are tied to the land, but the fruit of your labor is perpetually shared, often unfairly. The surprising insight? This constant extraction breeds a quiet, internal resistance. Small acts of cunning, burying a few extra turnips, claiming a poor yield to the reeve, working just slow enough on the demoscene without incurring wrath, like blood seeping slowly into the earth. Survival isn't just about farming. It's about navigating this human landscape of power and submission. The irony hangs heavy as the harvested grain. Your toil feeds the very system that limits your freedom and keeps you perpetually on the edge. You work harder for less, so he can live easily. Ask yourself, when everything you produce can be claimed by another, when your very effort serves someone else's power, where do you find the meaning in your day-to-day struggle? Is your sweat truly yours? Or is it just another tithe paid to the earth and to the man who claims ownership of it? This inescapable authority shapes everything, from the food on your plate to the fears you carry. It makes you look not only to the sky for mercy, but to the church, the community, and even the old ways, seeking any scrap of agency or comfort in a world where so much is beyond your control. The hearth casts weak light, but it's not the warmth of guaranteed comfort you seek. Your gut aches. It has for months, a dull, familiar thrum under the ribcage. This is the shadow of hunger, the constant companion in a life where food is not a right, but a battle fought daily with earth and sky. Your evening meal, like most meals, is pottage. You dip the rough wooden spoon into the communal pot simmering over the low fire. It's a thick stew, yes, but thick with what? Grains? Perhaps barley or oats from last year's diminishing store. Whatever tough root vegetables could be pulled from the cold earth. Maybe a few dried peas if you were provident. It smells earthy, bland, often desperately thin. This is the sustenance, the fuel for aching muscles. the only thing separating you from true starvation. Beside the pot sits a round loaf of bread. It's dark, heavy as a stone, made from the same coarse grains as the pottage. Rye, barley, sometimes oats if the wheat failed again. It's hard work to chew, dry on the tongue, but it is life. You eat it slowly, savoring the dense texture, praying it will stick to your ribs. This is the bedrock of your diet. Anything beyond this feels like a miracle, a whisper of paradise. Meat? A luxury so rare it borders on myth. Perhaps a tiny sliver of bacon, saved jealously from the one pig your family managed to raise and slaughter before winter bit too hard. Or perhaps a rabbit snared, or a bird brought down, taken at enormous risk from the Lord's woods. The penalty for poaching is severe. A hand lost, an eye, perhaps life itself. Yet, hunger is a powerful persuader, a devil that whispers tempting evils when your children cry with empty bellies. This ache is worst now, in the lean months, the time between the planting and the harvest. The stores are gone. The land is promising, yes, but it gives nothing yet. You look out at the green shoots and feel both desperate hope and a cold terror. What if the rains fail? What if the blight comes? What if the Lord takes too much? It's a constant gamble with the future. Here is the irony. You work the land that feeds the wealthy, yet you go hungry. Your sweat waters the fields, but the finest grain, the fattest geese, the juicy venison from those forbidden woods, they go to the Lord's table. You give thanks to Saint Isidore, patron of farmers, for every handful of grain, while the abbey stores overflow. Is this God's will, or simply the way the world is built? Consider the sheer psychological weight of this constant insufficiency. It shapes not just your body, but your morality. Does a starving man steal bread? Does a desperate mother pilfer turnip greens? The line between survival and sin blurs when the wolf is literally at the door, and the wolf is hunger. Ask yourself, could you live with this perpetual ache? Could you look at a Lord's feast knowing you would never taste such bounty and not feel a corrosive resentment? How much of who you are is shaped by the constant, gnawing presence of want? This struggle isn't just about food. It's about dignity, survival, and the silent, grinding tyranny of scarcity that defines your very existence. Your hands know the earth better than they know your own child's face in the scarce light. They are cracked, calloused things, stained permanently with soil and the blood from thorns and scrapes. This is the unending work cycle, the rhythm that dictates everything. From the moment the gray light steals across the fields, long before the village bell calls the faithful to matins, you are there. Your life is not measured in years, but in harvests. The spring thaw means breaking ground, the heavy wooden plow pulled by exhausted oxen, each furrow a victory against the stubborn sod. The summer brings the relentless war against weeds, a back-breaking, endless stoop under a sun that knows no mercy. Then the harvest, the frantic, urgent dance with the sickle or scythe, cutting the grain that means the difference between a hungry winter and mere hardship. The flail in autumn, separating grain from chaff, a monotonous beat, echoing the drum of your aching muscles. Even winter offers little true rest. Tools need repair, wood needs felling, barns need tending, and the cold demands constant effort simply to survive. There is no concept of a weekend. The calendar is marked by saints' days and feast days, precious, scattered pauses like tiny islands in an ocean of labor. Torrential rain or deep snow might force a temporary idleness, but it's the idleness of a body too spent or conditions too impossible, not leisure. It is work from dawn, when the first cock crows, until dusk, when the light fails completely, forcing you indoors to collapse onto straw. Your tools are simple, often inefficient. A wooden spade, an iron hoe, a sickle passed down through generations. Every task requires immense physical strength, repetitive motions that shape your body into a form built for toil, but also wear it down relentlessly. The surprising insight is how this constant, physical engagement with the land wasn't just work, it was existence. Your understanding of the world was rooted in soil, seed, and weather. Your body wasn't just yours. It was a tool for survival, a machine to extract sustenance from the earth. This wasn't just a job. It was your entire identity, your class, your destiny. There was a profound, almost brutal intimacy with the natural world, not romanticized, but raw, dependent on its moods, terrified of its caprices. Every storm could mean starvation. Every blight could mean ruin. Your prayers weren't for abstract salvation as much as for rain at the right time, for the hail to miss your field, for the sun to ripen the grain. Faith and survival were inextricably bound to the fate of the harvest. Ask yourself, is there dignity in this relentless, unchosen labor? Or is it simply the condition of survival, a biological imperative played out on a grand scale, binding you to the dust from which you came and to which you will inevitably return? Every muscle ache, every joint pain is a whispered reminder of the earth's demands, a slow countdown until your own body, spent like a worn-out plow, is finally given back to the soil it served. This cycle is not a choice. It is the fundamental heartbeat of this world. The clang of the church bell is the heartbeat of your village, marking the hours you cannot count, calling you to prayer you often don't fully grasp. You shuffle into the cool, dim stone, the smell of old wood and incense thick in the air. It is a place apart from the biting wind and the gnawing hunger. Here, saints with chipped paint gaze down from murals, their stories of vivid scripture you understand far better than the droning Latin from the priest at the altar. This is where the world makes a terrible, beautiful sense. The church is the frame around your fears, offering not just solace, but an explanation for every blight, every failed harvest, every fever that steals a child. Demons lurk in shadows and sinful thoughts. Angels guard the righteous path, and the priest Father Thomas holds the keys, dispensing blessings like precious rain and warnings like the crack of thunder before a storm. You listen, though the words blur. You watch the priest's hands rise, the solemn gestures. The elevation of the host, the most holy moment. It's not just belief, it's a visceral awe, a connection to something vast and terrifyingly powerful. You cross yourself, feeling the wood of the pew hard beneath your worn cloak. On feast days, there is light and song, a brief, intoxicating joy in a life often defined by hardship and lack. But always, beneath the surface, is the deep-seated dread of sin. The fear of eternal damnation is more real than any physical pain. Confession offers a fragile peace, a temporary reprieve from the weight of your trespasses, a harsh word spoken in anger, a moment of envy when a neighbor's crop flourishes. The surprising insight is how deeply faith is woven into the very fabric of survival. It is not just a spiritual practice, it is a practical toolkit. Prayer is your medicine against the fever, a saint's relic clutched tight, your shield against the unknown. Superstition blends seamlessly with piety. You wouldn't walk under a ladder, just as you wouldn't miss Mass. Is that truly devotion, or simply hedging your bets against a capricious, unseen world? The Church defines morality, yes, but often through the lens of obedience and fear, not just love. It provides community, tells you why things happen, God's will or divine punishment, and offers the only glimmer of hope beyond a life that promises little ease. But in its absolute authority, in its pronouncements on sin and salvation, it also holds immense power, a control over your very thoughts and actions that is both comforting and constricting. Ask yourself, when the plague carts rumble past and you light a candle for the souls departing, is it faith in a loving God that fills you, or pure, unadulterated terror of the judgment to come? Was salvation earned through righteous living, or simply hoped for through constant, fearful appeasement? The lines blur, as they always do in survival. The ache is a constant companion. It lives in your joints after a day in the field, in your back bent over the loom, in the dull throb behind your eyes from smoke and strain. Your body, a vessel crafted by God, feels less like a gift and more like a battleground, relentlessly besieged. Every scratch from a thorn, every nick from a tool, is a potential entry point for unseen forces, spirits, or simply corruption the wise women call bad humors. A simple cut, left untreated or clumsily bound, can swell and weep, turning angry shades of red and purple, the pain climbing your limb like a creeping vine. You've seen neighbors lose fingers, even arms, to such simple wounds festering, the stench a grim warning. Hygiene is a luxury you barely comprehend in its modern form. Water is precious, often polluted, primarily for drinking and cooking. Washing your body fully is a rare event, often tied to specific festivals or deemed unhealthy in winter. Teeth, they yellow, They blacken, they loosen and fall out with alarming frequency, leaving painful gaps where food collects. Fevers sweep through the village like wildfire, leaving faces flushed and eyes glassy, prayers whispered over sweating, shivering forms. Sometimes the fever breaks, sometimes it claims another soul. It's a lottery drawn by forces beyond mortal understanding. And then there is childbirth. For a woman, it is the valley of the shadow of death. Each pregnancy a gamble, each labor a terrifying journey, where life and death are inextricably linked. You have helped birth babies who emerged silent and blue, seen mothers bleed out despite the midwife's frantic prayers and poultices, heard the desperate cries for Saint Margaret, patroness of childbirth. The village graveyard holds a disproportionate number of tiny markers, children claimed by the flux, the coughing sickness, or just the mysterious wasting away that takes the youngest and most vulnerable. Losing 3 children before their 5th birthday is not unusual. It is simply life. Medicine, it is a patchwork quilt of inherited wisdom, desperate hope, and outright superstition. The local wise woman might have a store of herbs, willow bark for pain, chamomile for calming the belly, poultices of bread and milk for boils, but she also might prescribe charms, incantations whispered over a wound, or recommend bleeding to balance the humors, often weakening you further. Priests offer prayers, saints are invoked for specific ailments, Saint Anthony for skin diseases, Saint Apollonia for toothaches, and illness is frequently seen as divine punishment or the work of witches. There is a strange, melancholic irony in watching someone desperately tie a string with a knot for each ache around their leg, believing it wards off sickness, when a little clean water and rest might offer more genuine relief. Your body is not your own in this age. It is subject to the winds of the elements, the scarcity of food, the ever-present threat of infection, and the often fatal interventions meant to help. Death is not abstract. It is the neighbor who coughed his last breath last night, the infant buried yesterday, the mother who never recovered from lying in. Was it faith that sustained them through this physical agony, the belief that suffering purged the soul, or simply the grinding necessity of survival, the refusal to yield until the body finally surrendered? You do what you can. Pray, seek herbs, hope the fever passes, because the alternative is simply to lie down and wait for the bells to toll. You wake in darkness. The fire is out. Beside you, your youngest coughs again. The cold seeps into the thatch, into your bones. But there is no staying in the warmth, meager as it is. Outside, dawn is a gray bruise on the horizon. The world calls, and the world waits. The family unit is not a sentiment here. It is the very bedrock of your existence. It is your primary source of labor, your only social safety net, your identity etched into the soil you work together. There is no concept of going it alone. To be alone is often to be dead. Your family is the collective body that keeps you breathing, the shield against the wolf, the famine, the Lord's displeasure. Children are not just loved, though affection certainly exists, a quiet, sturdy thing, born of shared hardship. They are essential hands, from the moment they can walk. A child of 5 is already helping gather sticks, chase birds from the newly sown fields, carry water. By 10, they are working alongside adults, their small bodies surprisingly strong, needed to weed the crops, tend the animals, assist in the demanding rhythm of the seasons. Every birth is a risk, a prayer whispered in the darkness, a gamble against infant death. But if the child survives, it is another pair of hands granted by God or fate, another soldier in the constant war against hunger. It's a practical love, forged in the crucible of necessity. Marriages, therefore, are rarely tales of courtly romance. They are practical arrangements, negotiated not for stolen kisses, but for land, for oxen, for labor. The daughter of one family marries the son of another, and suddenly their fields are joined, their working power doubled. It is a merger, a strategic alliance, ensuring the continuation and survival of two bloodlines, pooling resources against the relentless pressures of medieval life. Love might grow, perhaps, in the shared effort of a lifetime, but it begins as a ledger entry. The family plot, your patch of earth, is not just land. It is the past and the future intertwined. It must be worked, it must yield, and crucially, it must be passed down. Its survival, your family's survival, depends utterly on the continuation of the line. A barren marriage is a slow death sentence for the lineage, a tragedy that can feel like a curse from the saints themselves, sparking desperate prayers, superstitious rituals, and sometimes harsh realities for a wife unable to bear children. This unit, bound by blood and earth, shares everything. Space is tight, a single room or two for sleeping, eating, living, dying. Food is shared, painstakingly portioned. Work is shared from dawn until dusk. Grief is shared, huddled together after a death. And rare moments of joy, a successful harvest, a child's baptism, a feast day, are savored together, brief candles flickering in the long, demanding night of existence. Ask yourself, in this world where your very survival depends on the collective strength and purpose of your family, where practicality overrides sentiment at every turn, would you resent the bonds that tether you, or would you find strength in the absolute, undeniable necessity of belonging, bending just enough to fit the mold cast by the demanding, unforgiving earth and the needs of your blood? The sun beats down on the newly cut field, the air thick with the scent of earth and sweat. Your back aches, but you keep swinging the scythe, the rhythm catching like a fever, spreading through the line of workers beside you. This is the harvest, the great communal push. Old Thomas, his face etched like ancient bark, works opposite you, pausing to wipe his brow and offer a tired grin. Young Mary is there too, her laughter floating over the rustling wheat. When sickness grips your home, it is these hands, these familiar faces, that bring broth, that watch the fire, that help bury the dead infant too small for this cruel soil. The mill, grinding the village's grain, is a shared heartbeat. The well, its stones slick with generations of touch, a shared lifeline. You are not alone. You are bound, as surely as wool is spun into thread, to this tight knot of souls. But the closeness that saves can also suffocate. Every hushed word carries weight. The widow Eleanor's hasty remarriage sparks whispers by the dying vat. A misplaced boundary stone between your strip and Robert's becomes a festering wound of accusation and muttered curses, settled not by law, but by the priest's weary mediation, or the threat of a drawn knife in the smoky common house. Your reputation, built over years of honest toil and quiet piety, can shatter like cheap pottery over a stolen chicken or a perceived slight. Children's squabbles mirror their parents' deeper buried grudges. The village, a raft keeping you afloat in a sea of uncertainty, is also a cage, its bars made of knowing eyes and wagging tongues. There is no hiding here. Your joys are witnessed, your griefs observed, your sins whispered about before the bells even stop ringing on Sunday. The irony hangs heavy. You need each other to survive the lean times, but the sheer proximity of that need breeds endless petty strife. It's a constant dance between dependence and resentment. The shared struggle for survival often manifests not in grand battles against the elements or disease, but in the quiet, persistent friction of everyday life, where a spilled pail or a sharp word can feel like a betrayal of the fragile bond that holds everything together. Ask yourself, is this suffocating closeness the price of survival, or simply the brutal reality of being known, truly known, by your fellow humans? Would you trade this tangled web of support and conflict for the dangerous solitude of the unknown? But the darkness, it doesn't last forever. Not every day grinds you down to dust. Just as the seasons turn, just as the bells mark more than just the hours of prayer, there are moments when the weight lifts, if only for a precious, fleeting time. You feel it stir in the village square, a whisper passing from hovel to hovel. A feast day is coming, a saint's day, a blessing. A day when the relentless rhythm of toil is broken by decree. Suddenly, the air is different. Anticipation hums like a trapped bee. This isn't just a day off. It's a release valve, sanctioned by the church, woven into the very fabric of the year. The priest might offer a special mass, yes, but afterwards, the world transforms. Tables are set outside, rough-hewn planks laden with whatever can be spared. Perhaps a pig has been slaughtered, a rare, glorious sight. The smell of roasting meat, a scent so rich it feels like wealth itself. Bread, baked in the communal oven, is passed around warm, and the ale, oh, the ale flows freely. Old women share stories by the fire, their faces etched with hardship, softened by the warmth and the shared sense of reprieve. It is a time for courtship, for settling minor feuds over a cup, for remembering that you are not just a solitary soul struggling in the mud, but part of something larger, a community that breathes together, suffers together, and on these rare days rejoices together. These simple joys, the taste of meat, the warmth of ale, the sound of music, the easy company, were not luxuries. They were vital sustenance. The surprising insight isn't just that they found joy, but that these bursts of communal celebration were absolutely critical for survival. They weren't just spiritual or social events. They were psychological and even economic necessities. They redistributed small amounts of wealth, food, drink. They reinforced social bonds that were crucial in a fragile world. And they offered moments of profound mental rest from the constant anxiety of hunger, sickness, and death. The church calendar, in mandating these breaks, provided a structure for endurance. It offered hope, tied to a fixed, predictable point in the future. After this Lent, after this harvest, will come a day of feasting. Ask yourself, was this joy a gift from God, a reward for endurance, or just the brief, necessary gasps between plunges beneath the waves? Perhaps it was all of these things. The changing seasons offered their own quieter joys too. The tentative green of spring after a brutal winter, the rich bounty of the harvest, the quiet, albeit cold, rest of winter, forcing a slower pace, a chance to mend clothes and share stories by the fire. These moments, snatched from the jaws of ceaseless hardship, were precious beyond measure. They were the small, flickering candles in the vast, enclosing darkness. They were the proof that life, however brutal, a child burns with fever, eyes rolling back. The priest whispers prayers. The village elder mutters charms against the evil eye. You watch, helpless, the heat radiating from the small body like a furnace door opened in December. Sickness isn't just bad air or spoiled food. It is often a skirmish in a cosmic war. It is God's hand testing your faith, or the devil's malice whispering from the shadows, or perhaps whispered behind cupped hands. The dark work of someone nursing a grudge, their sorcery curdling the very air the child breathes. Beyond the edge of the tilled fields, the forest looms, not just wood and leaf, but a place where the known order frays. Fairies might steal unattended infants, replacing them with changelings with ancient, knowing eyes. Outlaws, yes, but maybe something worse walks there too. Crop blight isn't just poor soil or bad weather. It's a punishment for communal sin, or a demon invited by careless talk. Death, sudden and swift, isn't just the body failing. It's a soul wrestled for. A dark ferryman come too soon. These weren't just quaint stories. These beliefs were the tools medieval people used to carve meaning from chaos. When the harvest failed and hunger gnawed at your gut, blaming a witch or a resentful spirit offered a target for your fear, a narrative thread in the terrifying tapestry of existence. When a beloved died, attributing it to God's inscrutable will, though painful, might offer a sliver of comfort, placing them in a divine plan rather than the cold, random earth. It was a system of cause and effect, where the causes were invisible but influential, and the effects demanded ritual, prayer, charm, or accusation. It offered agency, a way to push back with a protective amulet, a specific blessing, or the terrible justice of the ducking stool. Consider this. While we seek scientific explanations, building hospitals and studying microbes, they built churches and studied omens. Their practical tools for understanding the world were rooted in faith and fear, shaping everything from planting rituals to legal codes. The surprising insight is just how functional these beliefs were. They provided a social cohesion against perceived external threats, both human and supernatural, a framework for morality, fear of eternal damnation, and a way to process unimaginable loss. They weren't naive fancies. They were their science, their psychology, their survival manual. And perhaps the irony lies in how much energy was spent battling unseen forces, when the true enemies, famine, plague, brutal labor, the arbitrary cruelty of lords, were terrifyingly real and far less susceptible to spells or prayers. Ask yourself, when faced with true helplessness against forces you cannot control, how different is finding comfort in a prayer or a charm? From seeking patterns in data or explanations in complex theories we might not fully grasp. What do you attribute to fate, luck, or forces unseen when rational explanations fail? Do we ever fully shed the need for a story that makes sense of the terrifying unknown? The air feels thick with unspoken tensions, a knot that tightens whenever the bailiff's shadow falls across the village green. You know the routine: a dispute, a petty theft, perhaps an argument over a boundary marker shifted just a few inches too far. These aren't matters for faraway kings or learned judges. They are settled here, under the watchful, uninterested eye of the Lord's representative, typically the bailiff or steward, gathered in the open or maybe a corner of the manor house. This is the manor court. It's not a place seeking some abstract notion of fairness, a balanced scale weighed against truth. No, the purpose is blunt, pragmatic as a farmer's sickle. Maintain order. Keep the peace that ensures the fields are worked, the rents are paid, the Lord's property is respected. Your survival, your standing, your very voice in this space depends less on your innocence and more on whether your actions disrupt His harvest, His quiet dominion. You watch as Thomas, accused of letting his pigs root up a neighbor's carefully tended patch, stands before the bailiff. There are no lawyers, no complex arguments, just accusations, denials, and the bailiff's cold, assessing gaze. A quick pronouncement, a fine. A few precious silver pennies, earned over weeks of back-breaking labor, are now forfeit. Resources you needed for winter stores, for a new tool, for simple survival, are gone. A bitter pill, swallowed because resistance means something far worse. Sometimes, the punishment isn't just the loss of goods, it's the loss of dignity. The stocks or the pillory await for those who steal, those who fight, those who speak disrespectfully. Placed in the village center, head or hands trapped in wood, you become a spectacle. The chilling wind bites, the sun beats down, but the worst is the gaze of your neighbors, the snickers, the whispered words, the thrown mud or rotten vegetables. Shame is a weapon wielded brutally, scarring deeper than a whip. It's designed to isolate you, to make you a living lesson for everyone else, a grim form of communal discipline, rooted in public fear and enforced obedience. And for graver offenses, or perhaps just the Lord's displeasure, corporal punishment, the sting of the lash, the ache of a joint deliberately twisted, blood on the ground, a raw, visceral reminder of who holds power. There is no concept of rights here, not as you understand them. Your body, your labor, your freedom, they are all subject to the Lord's will, mediated by His court. There's a melancholic irony in it. The very system meant to provide justice is itself a tool of control, a heavy hand pressing down on your already precarious life. The insight sinks in like damp rot. Your safety lies not in righteousness, but in invisibility, in conformity. Avoid disputes. Keep your head down. Make your payments. Obey the rules, even the unspoken ones. The system isn't designed to protect you, but the framework that contains you. Ask yourself, how do you navigate a world where justice serves power, not fairness? Do you rage internally, simmering with resentment? Or do you learn to accept this reality, bending low like wheat in the wind, praying the storm of the Lord's court passes you by? You stand beside the small wooden box. Not really a box, just planks nailed together. Inside, wrapped in plain linen, is your youngest brother. He was laughing yesterday, chasing a stray chicken. This morning, he was gone, taken by the sudden fever that grips the village like a cold hand. Death is not a story told in faraway kingdoms or whispered in dark alleys. It sleeps in your own house, eats at your table, takes your breath when you least expect it. You've seen siblings buried before. 3 others did not survive their first year. You watched your mother's face turn gray as the cough took her last breath last winter. You helped wash the farmer down the lane after he was crushed by a cartwheel. His final moments, a gurgle of blood and air. Death is your frequent neighbor, an intimate, uninvited guest. You learn its face young. The hollow eyes, the sudden stillness, the chilling cold. It is the scythe that harvests life indiscriminately, taking the babe from the cradle, the strong man from the field, the wise elder from the hearth. There are prayers, of course, whispered to saints for intercession, chanted over the dying. Candles are lit to guide the soul, or perhaps simply to push back the terrifying darkness. Holy water is sprinkled, relics clutched. You fear not just the death itself, but the state of the soul after. Purgatory is a real, terrifying place, and hell waits for the unprepared sinner. Every death is a stark reminder to examine your own conscience, to confess, to seek absolution, for you know you might be next. The funeral is simple, practical. Your brother is carried to the churchyard on the shoulders of his father and uncle. The priest says brief prayers in Latin, words you don't fully understand, but whose cadence is familiar, a lullaby of finality. There is grief, yes, a deep ache that makes your chest tight and your eyes burn. Your mother weeps quietly, a sound as old as time. But there is also an acceptance, born of constant, weary proximity. It is the order of things, written in the stars, the will of God. You watch the shovels turn the soil, the earth falling heavily onto the small form below. It is a brutal finality, yet oddly comforting in its predictability. He is with the others now, under the ancient yew tree, awaiting the last judgment. This constant brush with mortality shapes everything. It makes life precious in its fleetingness, yet cheap in its abundance. It makes you cling to faith, desperate for a promise of something better beyond the veil of tears. It breeds a certain fatalism. What is the point of grand plan? Yet, paradoxically, it also strengthens the bonds of community. You grieve together, dig graves together, support the widowed and orphaned. It is a shared burden, a collective reality. Ask yourself, when death is your constant companion, does life become more vibrant in its brief flicker, or merely a prelude to an inevitable, expected end? Was their stoicism true acceptance or a necessary shield against soul-crushing despair? You feel it in your bones before the calendar dictates it. The shortening of the light, the subtle shift in the wind, the way the earth draws its breath before the hard freeze. Your life, everyone's life, is not a linear path, but a wheel forever turning. It is the cycle of the seasons, the cruel grip of winter, the desperate hope of spring, the frantic toil of summer, the precarious reward of autumn. This isn't just weather. It's the fundamental rhythm of survival. The hunger that gnaws through the lean months defines the frantic energy of planting season. Every back-breaking day in the fields is a prayer against the spectral fear of an empty larder next winter. The harvest isn't just food. It's a reprieve, a brief exhale before the long, cold inhalation begins again. And this cycle dictates not just your stomach, but your soul. Saints' days punctuate the farming year. Prayers rise with the planting and the harvest. Rituals mark the coming of winter's darkness and the longed-for return of spring light. You live in intimate, inescapable communion with the turning earth, a partnership of necessity and profound, unquestioning faith. Within this larger, natural cycle are the smaller, intensely personal ones that echo the grand design. The cycle of birth and death. The village midwife, her hands calloused and knowing, ushers new, vulnerable life into the world, mirroring the spring shoots pushing through hardened soil. The infant's cry, a fragile, defiant sound against the ever-present possibility of hunger, cold, or fever. And then, the inevitable counterbalance. The tolling bell announcing a death, a soul's departure, mirroring the leaves falling from the trees, returning to the earth from which they came. The rhythms of sorrow and cautious joy are interwoven. A christening might follow a funeral within weeks in a single household, a constant, brutal reminder that life and death walk hand in hand, two sides of the same turning coin. What is surprising, perhaps, is not the hardship, but the profound sense of belonging these cycles instill. In a world brimming with unpredictable dangers, plague, famine, bandits, the wrath of God, the predictable turning of the year, the certainty of the harvest following the planting, if God wills it and no blight descends, the inevitability of death after a life lived, however short, provides a framework. It's a hard structure, built of necessity and acceptance, but it is structure. You are not adrift in chaos. You are part of a vast, ancient, divine mechanism. Your toil, your prayers, your births, your deaths, they are all part of the turning wheel. There is a grim comfort in knowing your struggle is not unique, but shared across generations, across every field and village. Belief isn't just about securing a place in heaven. It's about making sense of the wheel. Why does the harvest fail one year? Perhaps a sin unconfessed, a saint ignored, a mischievous spirit angered. Why does a child live when others succumb? God's grace, or maybe the protective charm worn secretly beneath the tunic. Superstition blooms in the gaps of understanding, attempts to nudge the wheel, to placate the unseen forces that govern rain and sun, health and sickness. The ritual isn't empty gesture. It's a desperate, practical action born from the cause and effect understanding they possess. If this happens, then this must have been the reason. If the crop fails, the reason isn't just poor soil. It's something else, something that requires a different kind of action, a different kind of planting, the planting of prayers, of penance. This deep immersion in cycles shapes perception. Time isn't measured in abstract minutes, but in the tasks of the season, the progress of the crops, the age of a child by the number of winters they've survived. Identity is tied to the cycle. You are a tiller of the soil, a weaver, a smith defined by your role within the community's cyclical effort for survival. There is melancholy in the repetition, perhaps. The same fears, the same struggles, year after year, generation after generation. Was there ever a moment when they questioned the wheel, when they longed for a different path, a life unyoked from the relentless turning? Probably, but the wheel demanded they keep turning with it. Ask yourself, do you understand the quiet strength found in surrendering to cycles larger than yourself? Or do you resist the turning, fighting for a straight line in a world built of circles? The mud squishes between your toes as you walk the edge of the newly plowed field. The air is cool, damp with the promise of rain, but not the violent, crop-flattening kind you dread. This is the time when hope is most fragile, most vital. You don't gaze at the distant castle and dream of silk or gold. Your dreams are rooted in the earth, in the belly, in the warmth of a hearth that hasn't gone cold from lack of fuel. What do you truly wish for? Not abstract glory or grand adventures. Your soul yearns for the simple, tangible safety of enough. Enough grain in the storehouse to see your family through the lean months of winter, the ghost season. Enough milk from the cow, enough eggs from the hen, if you are lucky enough to possess them. You pray nightly, fingers worn smooth on a wooden crucifix or a simple string of beads, for the harvest to be untouched, not by the devastating hail that can shatter months of labor in minutes, nor by the creeping blight that turns vibrant green to deathly brown. You dream of a child's laughter that isn't punctuated by the racking cough, the one that signals the fever's insidious climb. You hope your Lord, your master in this world, finds reasons not to demand too much, not to raise the taxes or the labor owed, allowing you just enough surplus to breathe, to mend the roof, to maybe, just maybe, acquire a young piglet to raise. This focus on the immediate, the intensely practical, isn't a lack of imagination. It's a testament to the knife edge on which survival balanced. Every surplus seed saved is a triumph. Every healthy birth is a miracle prayed for, guarded against the evil eye with whispered charms and placed amulets. The future, for most, wasn't a canvas for personal ambition, but a terrifying void that must be filled, day by day, season by season, with the hard-won necessities of life. The greatest ambition, beyond the immediate needs, was often focused upwards, towards the celestial realm. You live in fear of eternal damnation, a terror vividly painted by the priest, but you cling to the hope of salvation. This life, this brutal, beautiful, fleeting existence, is merely a trial, a path to the promised land where hunger is unknown and suffering ceases. This deep, practical hope, intertwined with profound spiritual yearning, reveals a stark truth. When basic survival is uncertain, abstract desires wither. Your concept of wealth is counted in loaves of bread, bundles of firewood, the health of a child. Irony? They built cathedrals that scraped the sky, monuments to the hope of eternal life, while the hands that laid the stones often lived in hovels, praying just to survive the next frost. Their faith wasn't just belief. It was the ultimate survival strategy, offering a future when the present was so precarious. Would you trade all your modern comforts for the sheer, raw intensity of hoping simply for tomorrow? Ask yourself, in a world where death is a constant neighbor and life a daily struggle for substance, is salvation a reward for piety, or merely the last, most desperate, most human dream? You have walked a mile in their rough shoes, felt the gnawing hunger, the biting cold, the constant ache in your body, the weight of obligation, the fear of the unseen. You have witnessed their struggle for survival, their deep connection to the earth, their reliance on faith and community, their simple moments of joy by a fire's dying light. The scent of wood smoke, the taste of coarse bread, the sound of wind rattling a flimsy shutter. These sensations are now imprinted on your own fleeting awareness. You have seen the swift hand of illness, the stark injustice of the feudal order, the way a single bad harvest could unravel an entire world. Yet, you also saw the unwavering faith in a saint's intercession, the fierce protection of kin, the quiet satisfaction of watching seeds sprout from unforgiving ground. These were not statistics in a history book, whispers on the wind of a vanished age. They were people who breathed, sweated, loved, feared, and hoped under the same sun and moon we see today. They wrestled with questions of life and death, good and evil, prosperity and ruin, much as we do, albeit through a vastly different lens, shaped by immediate hardship and a world teeming with perceived spiritual forces. Their resilience was not a choice, not a noble virtue to be admired from afar, but the very fabric of their existence. It was woven into the calloused hands that tilled the soil, the eyes that scanned the sky for portents, the voices that sang simple songs of hope or whispered ancient charms against the plague. To truly understand them is to see beyond the romanticized castles and brutal battles, to the muddy paths trod by millions whose names history forgot. It is to recognize that human ingenuity, community spirit, and the deep-seated drive to survive are not modern inventions, but ancient instincts honed over millennia. What can we learn from lives lived so close to the bone, where the margin between life and death was razor-thin, and the cosmos was a bewildering mix of divine grace and demonic threat? We gain perspective. We learn gratitude for the comforts we rarely notice. We witness the enduring power of belief, for better or worse, in shaping behavior. We see how necessity truly is the mother of invention, whether it was crafting a tool from bone or a remedy from herbs and prayer. Their legacy isn't etched in grand monuments they didn't build, but in the quiet persistence that carried humanity forward. Every field they cleared, every village they founded, every child they raised against crushing odds laid a stone for the future. The superstitions faded, the feudal lords lost their power, the specific prayers changed form. But the human heart, capable of both immense cruelty and profound tenderness, endures. The echo of their resilience, the quiet strength forged in hardship, still resonates within us. It's in our ability to adapt, to find hope in darkness, to lean on each other when the world feels overwhelming. We study these vanished lives not just for historical facts, but to understand the fundamental, unchanging core of what it means to be human, struggling, enduring, and finding moments of grace in the flow of time. They had no legacy carved in stone, no lasting fame beyond their immediate kin. But every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror or hope, built the world we now take for granted.